Hey folks, Dave the Not So Evil Viking 13 here, and unless you've been on a desert island, you of course have heard that Ubisoft and Massive Entertainment's The Division has finally launched after what seems like 100 E3s and 1,000 delays. I'm going to talk about The Division today because I'm in the weird place of actually being excited about the game after more or less just tuning it out for years now, I guess. If you guys have been on my channel for the last few months, you'll know that myself and the rest of the Casual Shenanigans Gaming crew played both of the recent Division betas, and to our surprise, we actually really enjoyed them, despite the overall lack of content. I was really happy that this was the case, because I completely enjoyed Massive Entertainment's previous game, World in Conflict. It's one of my favorite RTS games in the last 10 years, and I actually developed a couple of community maps for that game that were added to the official game via patches. If you go pick up a copy of World in Conflict and install all of the patches, you'll get my two custom maps, Virginia and Paradise. And one thing that really stuck out to me back in my World in Conflict days when I was playing that like crazy and making maps for it was the incredible amount of polish that Massive Entertainment brought to their games. On launch day, they not only worked, but all the features were there, and it was more or less bug-free. World in Conflict right out of the gate was a complete experience that looked like it was straight from a AAA dev, which I would definitely say that Massive is now. Their pedigree is impeccable after World in Conflict, and now The Division, so you guys can see where I'm going with this. For this video, I'm just going to lay out my launch day impressions of The Division as I played it about 6 hours over the last day and a half or so with the CSG crew to give you guys a rundown of what I think of the game. And you can expect some additional content for The Division coming from me here in the future. I am working on a special video coming out probably by the end of the week. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, let's dive in. Even if you're not a fan of The Division's gameplay style, and you obsess over the E3 trailers from 3 years ago, I don't think anyone could load up this game on PC at 1440p or 4K, crank the settings up and say, yeah, this is just not good. It is a beautiful, polished game, and even the UI, which at times is very overwhelming, is beautifully designed and animated. Even though the UI is constantly in your face, it's got these nice little blurs going on, it's got these nice animations and contextual placement in the environment that you're running through. It's just a very slick package. Massive pulled it off once with World in Conflict, and they've done it again here in The Division. So let's back up here for a second. If you're not familiar with The Division, what is it? Well, even though it was announced during the explosion of survival games that came after the DayZ mod, it's not a survival game, at least not yet. There might be some DLC and expansion packs coming down the line to add that, but at its core, it is an MMO shooter. This means that your abilities as an FPS player are secondary to your equipment and your level and your skills and abilities. I think this might be the first MMO style shooter that I've ever actually gotten into. I can't remember ever playing one like this before, even though I am familiar with the concept. I didn't play Destiny or anything like that. And I'll say right off the bat that the MMO damage system is going to be a stumbling block for the enjoyment of a lot of players that might be interested in The Division. It's a more unusual system, and it's really not my favorite. I would call the shooting and the combat in The Division, for the most part, to be just okay. If you're overpowered, it can be way too easy, and if you're underpowered, or doing what my group does and playing all of the missions on hard, the maximum difficulties, just to get the best loot drops, it's going to be a lot of damage tanking. You're going to have some bullet sponge enemies. But you know what, guys, that is the system that the game uses, and we knew it going into it. And it's not a bad system, it's just not my favorite. If you couldn't stand Destiny though, and you really don't like shooters that have bullet sponge enemies, even though I know some of you hate that phrase, bullet sponge, this game might not be for you. The damage model might be too much for you to get past. I know for me in the beta, despite liking the combat and the co-op missions, the damage model was something that I had to kind of get past. And I am enjoying it more. I just don't think I'm ever going to like it as much as I like the combat system in Arma or DayZ or, the Battlefield series, or just traditional shooters. Just because in most cases your shots don't have the impact and the feedback that those games do. What this does create, though, is a system that is all about your loot, and that is what gets my attention. I love gathering, collecting, organizing, and comparing loot in all the games that I play, and like Borderlands, this game is going to be dangerous for me. As you advance through AI-based missions with yourself or your group, you're going to get loot drops, you're going to get weapon upgrades, and a lot of times you're going to get the same weapon with just slightly different stats, and you're going to end up spending a good amount of time, if you're like me, comparing those stats, adding and changing accessories, selling off the crappier weapons, buying better weapons, and keeping your gear in top-notch condition. Again, that's a system that I like doing. I enjoy that. Kind of the carrot on the end of the stick, constantly chasing that next best piece of gear, but it does kind of give the game that MMO pressure where you feel like you've got to keep playing to get that better gear. You've got to keep up with your group if you want to keep up with other players. To go along with that looting system, you've got a fantastic customization system for all of your weapons and your equipment. I love the ability to zoom in, check out your weapon, to customize its paints, although they are rare, to customize its suppressors, its magazine accessories, its lasers, its foregrips. You've got a lot of options for all these weapons, and you're going to be able to find a weapon set that fits your playstyle and that you like a lot. Now, because it is very stats based, you may not be able to use the exact weapon that you want when you want to use it. I know that I absolutely love the 1911 and the M14, both in real life and in games, and I tried to get those weapons as soon as possible, but as I got better weapons that did more damage that weren't the M14 and weren't the 1911 pistol, I had to occasionally set those favorite weapons aside until I found an upgraded version. There's also an impressive amount of customization options for your outfit and your gear, which, like in DayZ, is one of my favorite parts of the game as you're interacting with other players, because even with a limited number of races and faces and hairstyles for your characters, the amount of different hats and coats and pants and shirts and backpacks that you can use, it gives you a lot of varied characters that you can run into in the world, and it makes everybody feel at least a bit different. Adds a nice bit of variety to the game as you explore. Speaking of variety in The Division, I want to talk about one of the concerns that I had coming out of both of the Division's betas, and that was I wasn't sure if the full game would have enough single-player and mission-related content to hold my attention for the asking price once it actually launched. And I'm very happy to say that from what I've seen in my first 6.5 hours, that's not the case. The game actually has a lot of missions and a lot of areas and a lot of encounters to explore. I'll just show you a quick look at my map right here after doing a number of the missions, and there's plenty more that I haven't even discovered in other areas. And also, the map is bigger than I was expecting. I'm not super familiar with New York, but this appears to be a massive chunk of it, and I'm sure that we're going to see additional areas coming in future expansion packs. And for those that might say, well, why don't we have those areas now? Let me assure you, when you play The Division as it is just right here, no DLC at launch, you don't feel like they cut corners. The playing area is massive. Not to make a developer joke there, it's huge. And the complexity and density of the detail is most definitely next gen. Now you can talk about downgrades since E3 and stuff like that, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes, but the world is incredibly meticulously detailed. And so even as you're running from encounter to encounter and mission to mission, the world itself, especially for me, is just a joy to explore. It is the most convincing virtual New York that I've ever explored. And at times, it's kind of stunning to see the skyscrapers burning as the snow swirls. At times, it's kind of spooky or just very apocalyptic as the snow swirls, and it's just very, very quiet. The environments overall are just very, very impressive and a lot of fun to explore. And I feel like for the $48 that I paid for the game from Amazon's pre-order deal, I could get my money's worth for this game just exploring and doing the encounters, let alone the actual single-player missions and, of course, the PvP Dark Zone. Additionally, I'm finding the narrative to be pretty compelling, actually. Of course, this is not the first game set in New York about a disease outbreak. There was Crisis 2, but this game in particular does a really, really good job at selling the story and inserting your unique character into it as a member of the Division that has been called up to try and retake the city after this outbreak. I haven't gotten very far into the story missions, but I'm really, really enjoying them so far. And while there's occasional weak moments in the voice acting and the character animation, for the most part, those elements are incredibly impressive as well, with some very nice motion capture, some great camera work in the cutscenes, and like I said, a pretty compelling storyline so far. I'm actually considering picking up that standalone book that you can get that's like a survivor's guide to the Division, and it has notes and scraps of paper and evidence that has been left behind by other Division agents and survivors inside of New York to help you unravel the mystery. It's more compelling than I expected. And returning to the topic of visuals just for a minute, you guys might know if you've been here for a while that visuals in my games are very important to me, and I really do believe that the Division, as it looks here at launch, is at least 80% of the visuals that we saw in the original E3 trailer. If you're on PC and you have the hardware to crank the visuals up to ultra settings at 1440p or 4K, if you can maintain a 60 FPS with those settings, which I know is really starting to push things, the game looks fantastic. It's one of the most convincing versions of New York that I've ever seen. Not only are the environments full of micro detail, trash, and clutter, and bullet casings, but the weather and the lighting is excellent. Sunrises cut through fog with volumetric rays of light, snow drifts across concrete barricades, and if you have it turned on, snow can actually build up on your character's clothing, and even on dogs in the environment. They get snow that piles up on top of them. I've definitely been running around taking some cinematic screenshots, and frequently, while playing missions with my group, I've got to stop and check out a little detail or a bit of drifting snow or fog that caught my attention. The game really is beautiful, and I'm very impressed with the overall performance as well. With my 980 Ti and my 3930K at 4.1 GHz, I'm able to maintain, on average, 55 to 60 FPS at 1440p and a mixture of high and ultra settings. I expect that to shore up a little bit as some better drivers come out from NVIDIA, who kind of dropped the ball here on launch week. They released an awful official driver, and I'm now running a beta driver, but that's acceptable and even good performance, I would say. This is going to be one of those games where, in a year or so, once more powerful graphics cards are out, and you can really crank things to ultra at those higher resolutions, it's going to look even better. On the networking side of things, despite a 1-hour outage, around I think 1 AM on launch day, the game's grouping, networking, and multiplayer features have all worked flawlessly for me and my group. The UI is very impressive, and it's very easy to add a friend to your friends list, to see them in the in-game map and where they are, to add them to your group or to join their group, and to jump right in with whatever they're doing. If they're mid-mission, if they're waiting for a mission, if they're going into the dark zone, the PvP zone, It's just really simple to use, and it all just works, minus that one hour outage on launch day that was on Ubisoft's end. From what I heard, all of Ubisoft's services all went down, every game, for that hour. I of course am no fan of having to use Uplay, but when it just works, I really can't complain too much about it, I guess. So guys, there you have it. Those are my launch day impressions of The Division. Now, I'll probably have a bit more Division content coming. Let me know if you guys would like to see more. I even haven't gone into the Dark Zone yet here on launch because I spent almost the entire time in the betas in the Dark Zone. I've really been enjoying the story missions and the side encounters and just running around exploring the city with my group. Overall, I'm very happy with The Division so far, and I would say that Massive Entertainment has pulled it off again and released a very polished and very fun game. Being not such a huge fan of the combat, it may not last forever for me. This might not be a game that I'm playing, 6 months from now, but that's okay, because the journey along the way looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. As always guys, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.